Herkese selamlar. Bugün iOS Developer Olmak serisinin dördüncü günüyle devam ediyoruz. Başlamadan önce yine bir önceki videoda neler yaptık bunlardan bahsedeyim. İlk öncelikle böyle bir layout yaptık. Uygulama denemez buna. Oyunun ilk giriş ekranı gibi bir şey yaptık yani aslında. Burada yine vertical stack kullandık, Z stack kullandık, e, horizontal stackleri kullandık. Burada bir uygulama yani bir önceki videolarda görmüş olduğumuz şeyi aslında burada biraz daha görsel olarak güzel bir şekilde işlemiş olduk. Onun dışında Swift'in functions şeyine baktık. Bu fonksiyonları nasıl kullanıyoruz? Fonksiyon sintaksını nasıl yazıyoruz? Bunları gördük. Şimdi bugün bu bu video serisini bitireceğiz. E, Yaklaşık yine 45 dakikalık mı? Aynen 45-50 dakikalık bir içerik var. Ee, Bu video serisi bittikten sonra yarın itibariyle sanırım BTK Akademi'nin kursuna başlamayı düşünüyorum. Bu kursla beraber atıyorum videoya buradaki makalelerle giriş yapıp ardından bu kurstan birkaç video izleyip o şekilde de ilerlemeyi düşünüyorum. Bakalım nasıl olacağını yarın göreceğiz. Şimdilik şu functions kısmını kapatacağım. Hatta bunu da kapatayım. Buradan devam edelim.
A lot from these lessons, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next lesson. Now with functions under our belt, we are able to execute a batch of code to change the cards up top when the user taps on the deal button. And you're going to learn that in the next lesson. I'll see you there. Alright, we're back in the war card game and now we're going to add functionality to the deal button so that the user can tap on it. Now if you're brand new to this series, click over here to start from lesson 1. Alright, let's dive in. All right, so here we are in Xcode looking at our war card game. Just to give you a reminder, let's just run it quickly and see what we can do with it. All right, so here it is. It launches in the simulator. We can see the cards. This button is not interactive because it is actually just an image right now. And these are the score labels. So going into the code that represents that user interface, if we scroll down, we're going to see our image element that represents that button right there. What we want to do is change that into an actual button, not just an image, right? So what I'm going to do is create some space here so we can work and you can clearly see what we're doing. I'm going to get rid of that image element and that's going to disappear as soon as we make this preview live. There we go. What we're going to do is first add a button from the library. So if you remember, that is this plus icon up here. If you click that and you go under this first tab, which is a library of all the views, and button should be at the top. If it's not, you can always type in button. So we're going to drag and drop that right there. Now, this is a basic text button, and I know it's a little bit hard to see there in the UI, but we're going to start with just a simple text button to demonstrate how it works, and then we are going to customize that with the image, the deal image. Let's change this string. Remember, it's a string data type. It's a piece of text. We are going to customize that into deal. And now notice that there are a pair of curly brackets here. And in between those brackets, you put the code that you want to be executed when the user taps on that button. So why don't we go ahead and just put a simple print statement. And we are going to just print out deal cards. Now, when we tap on the button, when it prints this out, it will print it out into the console area. That is down here in Xcode. So let me just drag this window up here. It's got all sorts of information. Now, if you don't see this part right here, here's the button that you would click on. In the lower right-hand corner, you would see this little button.
Burada bir duracağım. Bunu kaydettim. Şuradan açalım. Şimdi şu moddayken miydi? Tıklayabiliyorduk. Aynen. Tamam. Şu modda bir dakika bu modda tıklayamıyor muydum? Evet bu modda tıklayabiliyorum. Tamam. Şu moddayken eee layout'un şeyini görüyorduk. Outline'ını görüyorduk. Mesela şurada kartın çevresinde mavi bir dikdörtgen var. Bunu görüyorduk. Bu moddaysa interaktif olarak uygulamayla etkileşime geçebiliyorduk. Tamam devam ediyorum.
Button here. You click it to bring up this debug area. And if you don't see two different sides to it, there are two buttons again in the lower right that you can turn on and off. So make sure that this side with all the text, that's the right-hand side, that is toggled on, because that's where this is going to print out to. So why don't we, again, run this in the simulator? Actually, before we do that, let me just add a simple modifier so that this text button is more visible. Because right now, this blue text is really hard to see against the green background. Now, do you remember how to add a modifier? So you could very simply hit dot and then foreground color, and you can type in dot white, to change that to white. Or if you didn't want to do that, you could always go through the library by hitting this plus icon, choosing the modifiers, and selecting foreground color, clicking and dragging right there, changing that default blue text to white. All right, let's go ahead and rerun this in the simulator. All right, so here's the simulator. I'm going to tap on this button and it's going to run this code right here, print deal cards. As you can see, it is starting, each time I press it, it executes the code within those curly brackets. So great, our button works. Now, the next thing I want to do is to incorporate what you learned about functions. So instead of simply writing the code here inside of these two curly brackets, why don't we call a function from here? So this function is going to perform all the code related to dealing cards. So why don't we find a space to put this function? So this part you have to be kind of careful about where to put this function, because I haven't really explained yet what these structs are and where you would put your functions. So I'm going to tell you where to do that now, but it's very easy to make a mistake. So here's what I want you to do. So put your cursor, let's say.
Bir saniye duruyorum. Tekrar açalım. Bir sıkıntı var gibi şu anda. Neyse biz devam edelim. Burada e, en son şu print statement'ı yerine fonksiyonları kullanalım dedi. E, Devam
Let's
edelim.
say
Ne
right under
diyecek?
body right there, and you're going to go to editor, and you're going to go to code folding, and you're going to hit fold. You can also take note of these shortcut keys if you'd like. So we're just going to choose fold, and that's going to fold it all up neatly. If you want to unfold it, again, you just you can either double click this actually. You can double click that to open up. That's probably the easiest way. So again, put your cursor under body. If you don't have a blank space here, and you can do it there, all you need to do is actually make sure that your cursor is after that opening curly bracket of the body. And we're going to go to editor. We're going to go to code folding and hit fold. And the reason I want you to do that is because we are going to create a new line right before this closing bracket, but after the closing bracket of the body right there. And we are going to declare a new function. Now I'm going to explain to you in future lessons why we are putting this where it is, and what is a struct, how do you know where to put your functions and things like that. But for now, I just want you to follow what I'm doing. So type in func to declare a new function. We're going to call this function deal. If you remember the syntax.
Bunu struct'ın içine yazıyoruz çünkü e, yanlış değilsem şöyle bir olay oluyor. Lokal ve global fonksiyonlar vesaire e, farklılaşıyor olabilir. Örneğin bu struct'ın içinde bir fonksiyon yazarım. Fonksiyon atıyorum add together yani gibi bir şey. Ancak bu add together'ı bu struct'ın içinden çağıramıyorumdur. Dolayısıyla bu struct'ın içindeki fonksiyonlar yalnızca bu struct'ın içinde kullanılabiliyordur gibi bir şey olabilir. Ee, Şimdi şu deal'ı bir denemek istiyorum. Birkaç kere basacağım. Ee, Mesela buraya gelmedi herhangi bir şey. Acaba değişiklik yaptığımız için mi gelmedi? Bilemedim. Birkaç değişiklik yaptığım için gelmemiş olabilir. Ee, Şimdilik kapatacağım bunu. Çok önemli değil diye düşünüyorum. Devam
Tags
edelim.
for it, pair parentheses, which in between there you would put in any input parameters, right, that this function expects. For the purpose of this code, we don't need any input parameters, so it's just going to be an empty pair of parentheses like that. Now let's open up a pair of curly brackets like that so that we can actually put the code in there. Now in here, I'm going to put print deal to declare a string. We got to use the quotation marks, right? Okay, so this function, all it does is print deal cards, just like what the button did before. And it'll execute this anytime you call deal. So now let's open up the body again, scroll down to our button, and instead of calling print right here, we are going to call our new function. And look at that, autocomplete recognizes it, and all we need to do is that. Now let's run it in the simulator and just test that it still works, because we don't want to make a mistake at this point. So let's tap on that button. As you can see, it still works, right? What's happening is that when you're tapping on the button, it's executing this function. If you scroll a little lower, this is what that function still works, right? What's happening is that when you're tapping on the button,
Hmm. Şu an bende çalışmıyor. Ha, previews'a mı gelmem gerekiyor? Bununla alakalı olabilir. Tekrar bakayım. Ha, tamam şu an çalışıyor. gibi de tekrardan build edersek ne olacak? Bu kez daha hızlı olur diye umuyorum ama geldim. Şimdi deal'a basıyorum. Deal cards geldi. 1, 2, 3, 4 kere bastım. 4 kere daha geldi. Tamamdır. Şu an uygulamada da çalıştı. Az önceki gibi hata vermedi. Uygulamada sanırım executable kısmından çalışıyor. Ee, buradayken ise previews kısmında görüyoruz bu şeyi. 11 desibel. Bu neyi ifade ediyor acaba? Bilemiyorum. Şuradan en sola gelelim yine. Tamamdır.
The button is executing this function. If you scroll a little lower, this is what that function does. Right. So now in the future, when we want to add functionality to the button right here, all we need to do is add the code in here. So that's a basic text button. But what if we wanted to use an image for the button instead? Let's take a look at how we do that. Let's scroll back up to our button element. As you can see here, the button that you add through the library in this way, it only allows you to specify a piece of text. So this is a text button. If you want to create a button which can be visually represented by anything you'd like, what you would have to do is type out button, type out the first opening parentheses, and you can see a couple of different options for buttons that you can create. And what we were looking for is this one right here, action and label. So action is what happens when you tap on it, and label allows you to put any sort of UI code in there, any sort of UI visual elements. So let's go ahead and double click this, and you're going to see these input parameters look a little bit different from this one, right? This one only had the one text parameter that you had to supply, and that was for the text for the button. This one has two different ones. It has action and it has label. So you can double click on any of these. So go ahead, double click on action, this part right here. And what's going to happen is it's going to change in this sort of format right here. This first set of opening bracket, this is the action for your button. So let's stay organized here. So I'm going to actually get rid of this text button first. Okay. And in here, under label, this is actually where we're going to put the visual representation, right? Label, this set of curly brackets. Let's put in an image element, and our image name was button, right? If we go back to assets, that's what this is right here. Let's go back to content view and let's refresh this preview right here. Oh, okay. So we can't yet view the preview because we haven't filled in the code part yet. So you can actually just delete that code part and that will be valid. Okay. So as you can see here, we've got now a visual image of our button. And you see, this is the visual.
Bunları şöyle yapmamız lazım. Bir saniye ya. Çok karıştı burası. Ardından buraya label yazıyorum. Buraya image yazıyorum. Ya da button yazıyorum. Tamam.
Visual representation of the button. Now in here, this is supposed to be the action. Good thing that we created a function, right? We can simply call that deal function like that. Let's now run the app in the simulator again and take a look at what happens when we tap on our new button. So you can see it is an image element, but it is actually a button. And when we tap on it, it runs the deal function, which prints out this statement in the console area. All right, now that we have the button looking the way we want, let's add some more functionality to it. So we want our deal button to do more than just print out deal cards. We want it to actually deal cards, right? So how is tapping on this deal button and running this deal function, right? What sort of code can we put in here to actually change the images for this image element and this image element, right? And how are we going to update the score labels here as well? Well, let's first take a look at what represents these things and see what we can work with. If we scroll up, we can see that we have an image element that represents card 2. And this is referencing the image asset in our asset library, card 2. In fact, we have card 2 all the way up to 14. So you'll notice that when I change this in here, and I update the preview, it's actually going to change the card, right? Change to 13, right? change this to 14. And if I accidentally change it to a name that doesn't exist, then it actually doesn't show anything. Right? So what we need to do is when the user taps on the deal button, we need to run some code statements that would change what is being passed into this image element and this image element as well. Well, if you think back at the Swift code that you have learned so far, such as variables, constants, functions, there is something that can help us here, right? What I'm referring to are variables. So why don't we go at the top here and declare some variables to represent the cards for the player and the cards for the computer. And that way, when we hit the deal button, we can change the value in those variables. Let me show you what I mean. So put your cursor in front of var and just create a couple of lines right there like that. And we are going to declare a brand new variable to store these two values right here. Instead of, this is called.
Şimdi burada yapmak istediğimiz şey aslında ne yaptım ya? Burada yapmak istediğimiz şey buradaki iki farklı kart var. Anladığım kadarıyla hangi kart diğerinden büyük gelirse o taraf kazanıyor. Örneğin burada 3 geldi, burada 2 geldi. O zaman player kazanıyor. Burada 3 geldi, burada 2 geldi. O zaman CPU kazanıyor. Ancak buradaki kartları nasıl değiştirebiliriz? Burada image'e yazdığımız parametreleri değiştirerek. Yani burada kart 2 yerine kart 3 parametresini ya da kart 5 parametresini koymamız gerekiyor. Bunu nasıl yapabiliriz? Bizim yukarıda bazı değişkenler tanımlayıp bu değişkenleri örnek veriyorum işte bir random fonksiyonundan geçirip oradan çıkan output'u daha doğrusu bir fonksiyon yaratıp bu fonksiyonun içinde bazı değişkenler oluşturup bu değişkenleri random bir şekilde değiştirip ardından buraya ne denir? Return etmemiz gerekiyor bu değişkenleri. Bunu yapacağız anladığım kadarıyla. Şimdi devam edelim.
Called hard coding a string, meaning that when we just put a piece of text here, there's nothing that can refer to that piece of text to change it. So this is what's called a hard-coded value. We are now going to change that so that it can be dynamic. So we declare a new variable using var, right? And I'm going to name this variable player card. And I'm going to assign to it card, let's say 7. And then I'm going to declare another variable. Let's call this one CPU card. And I am going to assign to it card 13, that string right there. And now you can probably see where this is going. In the image element, instead of passing this hard-coded string into here, I can pass in the variable. And because the variable is referencing this string card 7, you can see that that is what this image element displays, right? And I'm going to do the same thing with the CPU card by putting in that variable, referencing that variable, and then passing it to the image element. So now you can see where we're going. When I tap on the deal button and it runs the deal function, inside the deal function, I can change the value that player card is pointing to. I can change CPU card to another string value as well, and that is going to cause the card images to change. And I don't want you to do that just yet because there are a couple of details that we need to go through first, but I'm just running through at a high level what our thought process is. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the scores down here, because if you remember when we built this user interface, the scores, we also used some hard-coded values. So down here under player, we hard-coded 0, and under CPU, we hard-coded another 0. Let's go up here and declare 2 more variables to store those scores. However, this time, I'm going to use an integer because that's going to make it really easy for us to add, right? We can add 1, add 2, we can perform these math operations on an integer. Let's do the same thing to represent the other score right there. And let's go down and change these text elements to refer to these variables that we just created. Okay, so here under player, instead of passing in this hard-coded 0 string, we are going to put player score. Now, you're going to see an error, and I'll tell you why. So let's change this window a little bit. It says no exact matches in call to initializer. So that doesn't really explain very much, to be honest, but I'll explain to you what the issue is. So this text element expects a text piece of data as input, as what to display, for this label. It displays text. But what we are passing into it is an integer, right? It's a number. So it doesn't know how to display that because it's only programmed, it's only built to display pieces of string data. So what we can do is we can actually convert this number, this integer data, into string data, and then, or rather, the string representation of this number. Right? So this is how we would do that. Here, let me get rid of this for now. We are going to create a new piece of string data, type in capital S string, and then open a pair of parentheses. And then in the center, in between it, you are going to put player score. So let's break this down. So first of all, notice that the error goes away. we're good. What we're doing is we're taking this integer and we are turning it into the string representation of that integer. So if it's, the number 10, it's going to be turned into the string 10, and then that is now passed into the text element. So everyone's happy. Let's do the same thing with this one. So we're going to type in string, pair of parentheses. In between that, we're going to put CPU score. And this is
Burada yaptığımızda aslında biz şimdi bu skorları integer olarak tanımladığımız için bu integer'ları biz bir text özelliği olarak yazdırmak istiyoruz şuralarda. Ancak yani text'in içine bir integer koyamıyoruz. Dolayısıyla bu integer'ı string fonksiyonunun içine sokarak bir string'e çevirip o şekilde yazmamız gerekiyor. Burada yaptığımız şey bu.
This is called casting. I know it's kind of a weird name, but essentially we are converting the int data to string data. We're changing the data types. It's called casting. We're casting an int to a string. That's what's happening. All right, so now we are all set up to modify these variables, right? It's player card, CPU card, player score, CPU score. We're all set to modify these variables whenever the user taps on the deal button right here inside this deal function. Here's something cool. If you right click on any function, you can jump to the definition. That's basically saying that I want to see what is inside this function. So jump, it's just going to zoom you straight down. It could be in another file even. It'll jump you directly there to see what is this deal function, right? And all we have to do is modify the code here to change those variables that we just created. Okay, this is the home stretch. One more lesson to add to the game. All right, let's dive in. Let's do a
Şimdi yeni lesson'a geçiyor. Burada da lesson'ın adı adding the app logic. Yani aslında işte biz burada deal'a bastığımızda burada deal card yazdırmak yerine gerçekten bir algoritmaya sokup bu kartları gerçekten bir algoritma uygulayıp bu kartlara ona göre bir skor elde edeceğiz. Bunu da bu derste
Let's do a quick recap of what we have so far. When we tap on the deal button, it prints out this deal cards statement down here. But what we actually want to happen is to randomize and display two new cards right here, right? Let's dive into the code for the button and let's go from there. So we're going to scroll down and this is our view code right here. You can see this is our button element. And when you tap on it, it calls this function deal. We scroll down a little further. You'll see this is where we've defined it and it prints out the cards. Now, what we're going to do is delete the statement and I'm going to add something that's called a comment, or some people will call it documentation, but essentially it is a little reminder that you can leave yourself that is not treated as code. So Xcode, as you can see when I type this, we'll treat it as this grayed out text and it's not going to be treated as code. You can just leave yourself as many notes as you want. And it's a good way to also write out the things that you're going to code. So we can say randomize the player's card, randomize the CPU's card, and we are going to, let's say, update the score. That's essentially what we want to happen. When we tap on this, we want to change the cards. Depending on who wins, we are going to update the scores down here. Let's take a look at how we are going to change the cards up here. We scroll up a little bit and we take a look at our view code. We can see that we have an image element representing the player's card right here and another image element representing the CPU card. You can see the card that is shown is driven by these two variables up here, player card and CPU card. Scroll up here, that is exactly where these things are. This string card 7 represents that. This card 13 represents that. And these are two variables. Now, one thing I haven't taught you yet is something that's called a struct. This is sort of an aside. So you don't really need to know this yet, but in the next module, we'll talk about what a struct is. And these are actually what you know as variables when they are declared inside a struct like this. This is actually also called a property, but we will get there later. So for now, you can think of them still as variables. Now, I want to point out one thing. If you notice the way that we've named these card assets here, we go into our asset library, they all have the word lowercase card followed by a number from 2 to 14. And the reason why I named it this way is because it's going to make us really easy to randomize and choose new cards when we tap on the deal button, because all we have to do is, let's say we wanted to change the player card, right? Is represented by this variable right here. All we have to do is change this to card and then a random number from 2 to 14. And there is a function, a built-in function that we can use that will randomly pick a number from whatever range we want. So I'll show you how to do that. But essentially when we tap on the deal button, all we're going to do is assign card, the string, followed by a random number from 2 to 14. And we're going to do that for player card and CPU card. And when we change the strings in these two variables, it is automatically going to be picked up by this image element here, these two image elements, and then you'll see new cards. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go back down to the deal button here. And let me show you what we want to do. So first of all, player card, right? So player card equals, remember this is referencing the variable up at the top. Equal is we're going to assign something new into it. We're going to type in this word, the string card, and then we are going to attach to it a random number from 2 to 14. Now we can use the plus symbol to join together two strings. So I can do something like this, right? And that would essentially be one string, card 7. This is called string concatenation, Right? Ignore the error for now. Now, I don't really want to put 7, right? I want this to be a random number. So instead of attaching the string 7, I am going to type in int dot random. Right? When you do that, capital I dot and an R, you're going to get this. And we're going to use this first one right here, this first function. And this is going to allow us to specify a range. And how we specify a range is we put in the lower range followed by 3 dots and then the upper range. And this will be inclusive of the lower and upper ranges. So essentially this function, this random function of int gives us 2 to 14. Now you won't understand exactly what this code means for now, but in the next module after I teach you about structs and classes and things like that and dot notation, this will completely make sense to you. For now, just type in int, capital I int dot random, and then type in this range. Now you're going to get an error here. And the reason why this error is occurring is, for one, there's 2 errors here actually. The first error is because when you're trying to do that string concatenation I was telling you about, it has to be 2 strings. Right here we have the card string, but here we have an integer data type. They're different data types. Remember way back then you learned about data types, how we have string, int, bool, double, and things like that? Well, this random number is actually an int. So what we can do is get the string representation of the int. Essentially, we are converting, or the proper term in app development and programming is called casting. We're going to cast the int data to a piece of string data. So then it becomes the right type. And we do that by typing in string and then wrapping the int in a pair of parentheses right there. So now this would actually be proper. And this now is actually another error. So now you can see that the error, that little red underline, is on the variable player card. So remember, if I scroll all the way back up to the top, remember how I said that when these variables are declared under the struct like this is called a property. Well, we're going to learn more about structs and properties in the next module. But what we need to do here is essentially add a special keyword to this property or variable to define it as something that powers the user interface. Like it's a piece of data that the user interface depends on. And that totally makes sense, right?
Şimdi buraya kadar bir özetleyeyim. Öncelikle buradaki şeyi randomize etmek için bir fonksiyon yazmıştık. Ona geri döndük. Burada biz neyi istiyoruz? Player card'ın ve CPU card'ın aslında random, rastgele bir şekilde değişmesini istiyoruz. Şimdi bunu nasıl yapabiliriz? Bizim burada kartlarımızın şuradaki input'a giren kartın isminin değişmesi lazım. Nereden nereye? Kart 2'den kart 14'e kadar değişebiliyor. Burada küçükten büyüğe doğru, yani eğer bir asınız varsa bu diğer bütün kartların üzerinde olduğu için 14 olarak isimlendirilmiş. Bunu nasıl yapıyoruz? Şimdi öncelikle burada ortak olan özellik ne? Bütün kartlarda ilk 4 şey kart, yani küçük lowercase kart yazıyor. Bunu aldık. Ardındansa 2 ile 14 arasında bir random number oluşturmamız gerekiyor. Bunuysa öncelikle bir integer tanımlayıp buna dot random ekleyerek 2 ile 14 arasında bir random number assign edilmesini istiyoruz. Ardından buradaki integer'ı bir string'e çevirerek buradaki kart string'ine ekliyoruz. Concatenation gibi bir ismi vardı bunun, unuttum şu an. Aynısını CPU için de yapacağız. Şimdi burada bir hata daha verdi. Bu hatanın neden verildiğini açıklıyor. Devam edelim.
Right? If you look down here, this image element right here depends on player card. Same thing with this one. This image element, which is visually represented here, it depends on the state of this variable or property right here. So depending on the state of these 2 variables, it changes how the user interface looks. So what we have to do is add a special keyword in front of both of these called state. Right? And the way we specify this is using the @ keyword, capital S, state, space. So you can see Xcode recognizes it as a special keyword, and this is called a property wrapper. So this is your property, and this is the property wrapper, and it essentially changes the behavior and attributes, kind of like a modifier. It modifies this property to just indicate that it is a special property, right? It is one that powers the visual state. So we're going to add the same keyword or property wrapper to the CPU card down here. And then if we scroll down back to the deal button, you can see that all the errors are gone. Now we're going to randomize the CPU card as well. Card plus, and then we are going to say int random 2 to 14. Right? And then we're going to have to, I'll show you this error because last time I don't think we took a look at it. So here, cannot convert value of int to expected type string. It's saying that this should be a string. So we're going to turn it into a string. All right, no errors. Perfect. So let's take a look at this. We'll run it and we'll try it out because we should be able to visually see these cards change. As we tap on this deal button, it's going to run this function. It's going to assign a random card number to player card and then CPU card as well. You see, that's really cool, right? It's actually working. Now, if you accidentally specified a number that doesn't exist, like these actually have to represent an image asset. So if you put 15 and you hit deal and it randomizes to 15, it either will show a blank. Let's randomize from 1 to 1 and you can see what I mean, because we don't actually have card 1 here. So it's going to be an error. It's not going to be valid. We have to stop the project and run it again. And yeah, there you go. It can't find that image because randomizing 1 to 1, you're only going to get card 1 and there is no image asset named card 1. So just a little warning for that. Okay, so let's change that. Command R to run it again. Now we get this. Okay, now we need to add some conditional logic to the app. This means code that can decide if this condition is true, then do this. Otherwise, if that condition is true, do that. And in Swift, this is called an if statement. Let me show you how. So here I have an empty playground to show you how simple it is to express conditional logic in Swift. And all you have to do is use the keyword if, just like that. And next, you're going to put a space, and then you're going to put the condition that you want to test. Now, with an if statement, it is if the condition is true, then execute this code. And if it's not true, then don't do anything. So why don't we say if A is greater than B, that's my condition. So if that is true, then execute the following code. And you put that code inside a pair of curly brackets like that. So I'm going to write a comment, some code here. Like it's whatever you want, as many lines of code as you want. You can even call a function here or do anything like that. So we are simply going to print, let's say, bang. Now, what is A and what is B in this condition? We haven't declared them. So let's declare two variables. So var A.
Şu burada yapmak istediğimiz şey bu randomize kısmını yaptık başarılı bir şekilde. Burada yapılmak istenen şey eğer burası 10 ise ve burası 4 ise yani buradaki integer buradaki integer'dan büyükse atıyorum CPU artı 1 olacak. Eğer buradaki integer'dan büyükse player artı 1 olacak. Yani aslında biz buralara da bir variable atayıp bu variable'ları kıyaslayabiliriz diye düşünüyorum şu anda. Bakalım nasıl ilerleyeceğiz.
Var A equals 4 to run this code. Now, the powerful thing with if statements is that you can specify multiple paths or multiple branches. So another variable. So let's say if B is 20, this is false. Then if this is false, it's going to skip this and it's going to test this else, right? Else means like, okay, if that's not true, then what about this, right? Else, if this is true, B 20, C is 10, it is true.
Burada da else'fi görüyoruz çünkü yani illaki biri diğerinden büyük olacak diye bir şey yok. Eşit de gelebilirler. Eşit gelmeleri durumu. Yani kıyaslanacak 3 tane statement var. Eğer player kart CPU karttan büyükse player'a artı 1 yap. Eğer CPU kart player karttan büyükse CPU artı 1 yap. Else diyeceğiz. Tie olacak yani hani beraber olacak. Herhangi bir şey olmayacak. Ya da ikisine de 1 eklenecek. Bunun gibi bir logic kurmamız gerekiyor burada. Bunun için
True.
vesaire de
Okay.
değiniyor. Burayı biraz hızlı
Not going to
geçelim.
specify more branches if you'd like. You can do else if as many different paths as you want. And then there is also a catch all, or sort of like a last resort path if you want to do that. And that is just simply else. So if this is not true and this is not true, then it's just going to execute this, whatever's in here. So if I run this, it's going to come in here because this is true. So let's change A back to 4. So this is going to be false, right? 4 is not greater than 20. And then let's change C to 40. So again, this will be also false. 20 is not greater than 40. And so it's going to come down here and it's going to execute this. And this is sort of like a last resort. And you could have something like this. A lot of sense. Like that. And so if we make A equal to B, so that will be true, we'll see bang. All right, now let's apply our newfound
Burada da işte en son eşittir ya da eşit değildir gibi ifadeleri nasıl yaparız bunlardan bahsettim. Mesela bu eşit değildir anlamına geliyor. Bu eşittir anlamına geliyor. İşte büyüktür var, küçüktür var vesaire. Bunları şimdi koda
found knowledge to the war card game. Let's do it. So back in our war card game, in the deal function here, we want to update the scores. So we can use if statements. We want to say if the player score or card value is higher than the CPU card value, then we want to increase the player score. Else, if the CPU card or card value is greater than the player card value, then we want to update the CPU score. And if you scroll all the way back up here, you'll see that we have two properties, variables, keeping track of the player score and CPU score. So we're just going to increment this by 1, depending on whose card value is higher. So going back down here, we're going to use the if statement. If And then we're going to compare player card value with CPU card value. And how do we get the card value? Because if you take a look at this, we're randomizing the number here. I've strategically chosen the numbers so that they represent the card image asset, but they also represent the card value. So down here, card 2 is smaller than any of these numbers, right? So ace, that's why I made it 14, because ace should be the biggest. So if someone randomizes an ace, that would be 14, and that would beat 13, which is king. So what we need to do is to be able to compare this random number with this random number. So we need a reference to it, right? But how do we get a reference to that number? Because I've specified it here, and it's going to get joined together with this card. So I can't actually refer to it. So the strategy we're going to use is to, instead of randomizing it here, let's randomize a number from 2 to 14 and assign it to a variable. And that way we have a reference to it, right? It goes back to that first Swift coding lesson you did a couple of lessons back about using variables to keep track of values. So here we are going to declare a new value. Let's call it player card value. And we are going to assign.
Aynen. Yapalım. Player variable atayacağız. Ee, Bunu şöyle de bırakabilir miyim acaba? Bunu illa bir şey
To assign to
değeri
it
atamam mı gerekiyor?
this. Right, so we're going to randomize that number from 2 to 14, and we're going to assign it into this variable. And then in here, we can specify that variable right there, right? And turn it into a string, because this is an integer, right? That's going to get assigned to this. And we're going to do the same thing with this CPU. Var CPU card value is equal to CPU card value. And then we're going to now be able to write our if statement. So if player card value is greater than CPU card value, then we're going to add 1 to player score. And to do that, we can say player score, and that's the variable that we have way up at the top of this file. We can do this. We can say equals player score plus 1. But there's a short form way you can write this, which is this, plus equals 1. And that is just going to increment whatever score it is with 1. Okay, so we're going to do it the shorthand way. And just like before, we have an error because, remember, player score is a piece of data that the user interface is dependent on, right? It gets displayed in this text label right here. You can see right here, this text, and this text right here. So what we have to do is add that state property wrapper to it, just like we did with the player card and the CPU card. All right, now we're going to come back down and no error. So down here, would I add an else or an else if I want to now compare, right, if the CPU card value is greater than the player card value? Now I could use if, and I can say, you know, in that case, CPU score with plus equals 1. But there's a problem with this because this is comparing player card is greater than CPU card. What if player card value equals CPU card value? What if they rolled exactly the same value? In this logic, the CPU would win, even if the values were CPU card value is greater than.
Else if şu şekilde boşlukta yazılıyormuş. Player card value equals to CPU card value diyeceğiz. Ya da şöyle diyelim. If CPU card value büyüktür player card value diyeceğim. Bu kez CPU skora artı eşittir 1 yapacağız. Bu da doğru değilse else diyorum. Hiçbir şey yapma gibi bir şey mi?
Then player card adding these comments are code. Yeah. So for this tie scenario, you can add 1 to each score. You can minus 1 from each score, or you can do nothing. So I'm going to choose to do nothing, but you can do that differently. So let's see if this works. Let's run our project. Oh, what happened?
Buradaki else'de herhangi bir işlem gerçekleştirmeyeceğimiz için bunu direkt silebiliriz. Şimdi biz de çalıştırırsak bunu replace diyelim.
There. I rolled a card. Take a look. I made a mistake. This is a perfect learning opportunity. So right here, player card is equal to card plus player card. But that doesn't make sense.
Burada niye bir hata verdi? Player card value was never mutated. Ha. Burada bu değeri hiç değiştirmedin. Bunu variable yerine constant olarak let keyword ile değiştirebilirsin diyor. Ancak biz deal'a her tıkladığımızda bu değişeceği için ona dokunmayacağım. Onların variable olarak kalması daha doğru. Şimdi oyunu başlatalım. Şimdi deal'a tıklıyorum. Evet, as 5'ten büyük olduğu için player'a artı bir verdi. Player yine kazandı. Player yine kazandı. As as bunlar eşit olduğu için herhangi bir şey olmadı. Player yine kazandı. CPU kazandı bu kez 14'ten büyük olduğu için. Ee, bakalım biraz çalıştıralım. Hemen hemen eşit gidiyor gibi diyordum. CPU çok öne geçti. Evet, hemen hemen eşit gidiyor yani gerçekten random bir şekilde. Ee, devam edelim videoya.
Makes sense, right? It should be equal to player card value, right? Because this is the random number. So I don't know if you caught that earlier on when I was writing that, but if you did, kudos to you, props. But if you didn't, then you're in the same boat as me. I totally didn't see that either. So you can see it works now. Well, I'm going a little fast, but ace. So player gets that. Oh, it's a tie. See, there's a tie, so nothing happens. All right, looks like it's working. And there's actually more ties than I thought there would be. There was another one. And there you have it. You've built your very first app. Now, before I tell you what you'll be building next, let's do a quick recap of how far you've come. You've learned how apps go from code to App Store. You've learned your way around Xcode. You've learned how to read and write Swift at a basic level. And you've learned how to build simple user interfaces. But more importantly, you've stopped doubting yourself about whether or not this is for you. Now, I want to introduce you to what comes after this work hard game, the menu app. This series continues from where the work hard game left off and prepares you for the next step in your iOS journey and beyond. Now, don't be fooled by this simple scrollable list. This is something that you could learn from tons of tutorials out there, but we're going to take it a step further. Not only will you learn the skills needed to build this app, but we're going to modify the code afterwards to mimic that of a more complex app. Now, let me explain. Many tutorials teach you how to build a simple single screen app, and with good reason. It's a great starting point, and you need to learn to walk before you can sprint. The problem is that there's a conceptual leap from a single screen app with self-contained data to a multi-screen app that fetches data from a variety of external sources. And not only is the code more complicated, but you'll have to understand aspects of networking, concurrency, proper app architecture, and coding for reusability, just to name a few. So in the second half of this menu app video series, that's what we focus on, explaining these concepts in preparation for the next larger, more complex app. So that's all fine and good, but when is this menu app video series going to be released and where can you watch it? Well, I'm happy to announce that it is free to watch on the Code with Chris learning platform. The reason it's not currently on YouTube is because the menu app series is a step up from the work hard game in terms of skill level. So I wanted to enhance the learning experience with practical exercises, quizzes, and human support. Now these things are all available for free through the Code with Chris learning platform. Now I want to be fully transparent. Aside from the quizzes, the challenges, and the human support that you're going to receive in our forum, you're also going to get a special offer to join CWC Plus, where you can get access to all of our available courses. You see, Code with Chris has grown into a business with a team of people behind the scenes making it all happen.
Ee, ilk uygulamamızı bu şekilde yapmış olduk. Bundan sonrası biraz reklam gibi. Dolayısıyla izlemeyeceğim. Ee, ancak yine de güzel içerikleri var gibi duruyor. Şeyden bahsetti. İşte single page bir app yapmış olduk. Yani çok kompleks bir şey değil. Gayet basit. Ee, yani App Store'a konamayacak kadar kötü bir app aslında. Ancak yine de Xcode'u öğrenmek için bir başlangıç yapmak için neyin nasıl çalıştığını az çok anlamak için her şeyi böyle ufaktan gösteren basit bir tutorial gibi basit bir app yapmış olduk. Bundan sonraki gün ne yapacağız? Bundan sonraki gün BTK Akademi'nin Swift ile iOS programlama dersine bir bakacağım. Hatta şimdi bir içeriye kısadan bir bakalım. Mesela kurulum diyor. Ya burada Xcode'u kurmaktan vesaire bahsediyor. Swift temelleri diyor. Biz az çok buraları öğrendik. Ancak işte şu farklı davranışlar diyor. Mesela bu ne olabilir tam bilmiyorum. Buradan başlayıp ilerlenebilir. Örneğin layout diyor. Biz burayı az çok anladık. Ama yine de izleyebiliriz. Ee, temel iOS özellikleri. Mesela ikinci ekranda çalışmak. Segü, mesela bu ne demek duymadım hiç. Veri aktarımı, yaşam döngüsü, veri saklamak, user defaults, veriyi silmek. Ee, bu tarz şeyler daha böyle datayla, daha böyle backend tarafıyla ilgili şeyler. Biz şu an daha çok frontend tarafıyla uğraştık. Sadece şu deal butonunda bir backend e, denilebilirse yani o da e, o tarz bir şeyle uğraştık, algoritmayla vesaire. Bunun biraz daha algoritma kısmına dalıp nasıl daha kompleks uygulamalar yazabiliriz? Bunları da öğrenmiş olacağımızı düşünüyorum bu kursta. Örneğin internetten veri çekme diye bir seçenek var. Son günlerde işte bu API'lerin son zamanlarda, son yıllarda API'lerin kullanımının çok artması nedeniyle belki bir API kullanarak bir uygulama geliştirilebilir. Ee, Hani sektörde hiç olmayan bir şeyi sektöre kazandırılabilir ve e, bu sayede uygulama fazlasıyla da indirilen bir şey olabilir. Bu gibi şeyler için tabii iyice öğrenmek gerekiyor.